Hello,
Hello,
everybody.
everyone. Hi. We have a great webinar tonight because we're going to do an interview. I know that we've talked about doing this in the past, but sometimes getting everybody together, making sure that they are set up and that Boyd can work with them. It's
Hello.
it's a process behind the scenes, as Boyd can tell you.
And who's our wonderful
But
guest?
Annie tonight, though, she said her husband's in IT, and my word, her download and upload speed is amazing. So, I'm jealous. So we're going to interview Annie from Project Resume. I think we've probably talked about Project Resume probably in the past at one of the other CCO lives, because we have talked about resumes. I know that Laureen and I have done that, and Jennifer and I have done that, and it's something that we get asked about all the time.
Absolutely.
And rightly so, because it's really hard. So to come up with a resume, I went to Annie's website and looked at some of the FAQs that she had, and it's like, yeah, these are the questions we get asked all the time. You know what, CCO, we do education, and we try to stick with that because that's what we do well. And so we want to give you the resources to use things like Project Resume to make your experience better in the coding world. And she's become an expert in it. Hey, Annie, it's so nice to have you here today.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
She works in a job that she does webinars also, so it won't be hard. Just a heads up, before we get to really rocking and rolling here, I want you to know that I'll be looking off to the sides back and forth because, as you know, we stream live on YouTube and Facebook and now LinkedIn, and I'm going to try to keep track of these other platforms and your questions, all right? So feel free to put those questions in and we'll ask Annie about those. We have some questions already set up, but be a little patient with me as I'm looking around as we do that. I noticed that this is kind of your motto or an abbreviated, there was another one on your website, the Professional Development and Career Advancement for Medical Coders. Before we go to the next slide where we really do an introduction, do you work with only coders or is it a broader spectrum with that?
I work with, and I love to work with, medical people who are going into the medical coding field, the HIM field, or people who are already in the medical coding field who are looking to expand their career, or maybe they have a position at work that they would like to apply for, or they have another position that they just are not happy where they are. So I like to work with anyone who is going into that. You don't have to already be a medical coder, and that's actually our specialty. We like to work with people who are new and show them that the skills that they have and the talents that they've received from other fields really do often translate into medical coding and HIM. So if that's your goal, then we love you.
And that's a pretty broad spectrum. I mean, coding, because there's so many things that you can do in coding. If somebody was interested in billing, would that apply to then? I mean,
absolutely, yes.
Okay. Absolutely. I know some people get hung up on one term, like, oh, only coders. Oh no, billing, coding, that's all, or getting into compliance and stuff. That's all in the same umbrella.
Yes.
So I'm going to let Annie just tell a little bit about herself. This is information that you can read. I'm not going to read this, but I want her to tell us a little bit about her background and what she's doing now. This Project Resume is not her full-time job. She still has her foot in the door with being a professional coder. You got to see her credentials over there too. And so go ahead and tell us a little bit first about your background.
Sure. Well, and thank you for not reading all of this because it is a very lengthy bio.
It was really good stuff though on there. I want to grab all of this stuff.
No, but I did earn my degree in health policy and administration at Penn State University. And while I was there, I was part of a professional development fraternity. So we are Phi Gamma Nu. And it was there that I really learned the ins and outs of professional development, resume, interviewing, all of that. And I was really very interested in it. So I kind of continued my interest in that after I graduated from college and started in the workforce. I've been coding since I got out of college, but I earned my first certification in 2005. And then that was my CPC. I also have my CRC, and then I have my CASCC.
Tell everybody what that is.
That is a certified ambulatory surgery center coder. So that is my newest one. It's actually not even in this bio yet, but it was a very interesting one to study for. I love to study all of them. Coding interests me, and I truly feel like everybody who's interested in medical coding for whatever reason can find their niche, can find their spot within the field. As you said, it's so broad, and there's so many wonderful things that you can do with your certifications and with your education. So I think it's really important that everybody know that. Sometimes we get bogged down with the education part or with the anxiety of getting that certification, but there's so much more to explore, afterwards as you move forward. So that's my focus with Project Resume.
That's really, really good. And I like how you had mentioned that this resonated with you early on, because I was it brought back memories of my high school days, and I'm going to toot my own horn.
Okay.
Have you heard of VICA through the trade schools and stuff like that?
No, I haven't.
I took health occupations, which was at the trade school, which was connected to the high school. And mind you, I graduated in '86. And so one of the organizations, the clubs, was VICA, and it was Vocational something Clubs of America. I can't remember what it was. But we would, they would have contests. So you would go local, you would go to district and then state levels and national levels. And one of the things that I did was in job interviews was one of the competitions. Yeah. And I went to state. And so I was so proud of myself that, but again, I think one of the only reasons that I did so well is that I don't have a problem just talking, and
nor do I.
Yeah. And that resonates with people, doesn't it? And so, but also one of the things I had to do was create a resume, right? And then you went through a mock interview from the point of filling out an application, submitting your resume, and then going into an interview with a panel of like 4 people. And it was creating that resume actually was a lot of fun for me. And when you said that you really enjoyed that, it's like, yeah, I enjoyed that too. I don't have time to do that, but there's such a need. When I worked at the college, that was one of the things that they helped. So I helped with mock interviews, and one of the other ladies in the office specialized in resumes and stuff. So I don't think people take advantage of that resource.
That's right.
They try to do it on their own, or they go get a template, and you can do that. You can go get a template off of Google or whatever. However, you also mentioned that, there's keywords that really resonate with when that makes that pop. And you may know, or you may not know what those keywords are if you're just starting out in, and my husband, he worked for the state of Texas, the highway department for a while, and he would always talk about they were on a point system. And some of these really big hospitals and things like that, they're on a point system that they mark off keywords. And that resume is where they get those keywords. They want to see them. And so having somebody else assist you with your resume is well worth the money. Plus, I might add, if you want to apply for more than one position or at different places, you want to gear that resume towards each individual position,
Sure,
right?
absolutely, absolutely, and there's really two. Well, there's many ways of going about it, like you said, but there is a way to create your resume to show your skills so that it can apply to a variety of positions. Certainly within, as you mentioned, billing or coding or compliance, and
Mhm.
I think a lot of times people use a template or um, they I know that there's a lot of templates out there that are a little bit flashy or they have pictures or graphs. I saw one on LinkedIn with a graph the other day and I had to scroll by because not it looks nice and it catches your eye, but it's not going
Yeah,
to catch, the eye of a recruiter. And I think there are a lot of pitfalls that you can fall into when you're
right.
just starting out, which is not fair. Everyone works so hard and they work so hard on their education and on their certification, and they just want to do what they love. And I just think it's really a shame when people can't translate that into a resume or even in an interview situation. It's
Right.
hard. People don't like to talk about themselves, even on paper, even on their resume. So
Right.
um,
They feel like they're
yeah.
tooting their own horn. Like, it's like if I
Yes.
sound too confident or if I
Yeah,
sound too good, I'm going to be
right.
overqualified. Or if I, or
Exactly.
or like this question here, where, and we get this a lot because as educators, helping people get their certifications or add those certifications onto the existing ones, because sometimes you've got people that are gung ho. They'll go get their CPC and then they say, hey, this was so great, I'm going to go ahead and pick up the COC, then the CRC, and then
Right.
they end up with like 4 certifications, but they
Right.
have no work experience. And
Right.
so we'll talk about that, but this
Yes.
is a question we get asked a lot as educators at CCO. So I'm just starting out in coding and I don't have any coding experience. Can I still create a resume that will get me a coding job? And that's that catch 22, right? Well,
Right.
everything I
Right.
look at says they want experience, and
Right.
I don't have experience, and I was like, I bet you they've got some experience that carries weight that they don't realize. So
That's
how would
right.
you address that when what do you tell people that ask you this?
Well, absolutely. It's a very common question, and I think that it weighs, I sometimes see too heavily on people's minds. A lot of times in the medical coding field, groups of coders, code teams, companies are growing so quickly that they have folks that are writing these job descriptions that maybe have never been a coder or maybe are not sure of what is exactly needed. So because of that, some of these job descriptions and some of the qualifications that are written as necessary can really be played with, and really they can be very flexible with it. And I always tell people to look out for, if it says 1 year of experience, does it say 1 year of specific coding experience? There's a ton of ways that you can create a resume that will get you noticed for those coding jobs. And like I said, so many skills and talents from all across so many fields translate into a coding environment. I have a lot of people that contact me that work in customer service or retail, and they are discouraged, and I can understand that, and they are really down on themselves, and they just say, well, I've never worked in that environment. But I say to them, have you made quick decisions? Have you worked in a high pressure environment? Do you have to work independently? I mean, that's a yes, yes, yes. So those are 3 top things, top skills and talents that coders and coding employers are looking for. So I'm going to use the word hate. I hate to see coders or people who are trying to get a coding position sell themselves short, because everyone's talents, they do translate, and you can list the things that you've done, the things that you've been responsible for, and a good HR representative, a good employer, a good employee, or a hiring manager is going to see that you have a drive to be a coder. And sometimes I've worked with hiring managers that have said, wow, this person is really, this is a 180 turn for them to get into coding. I'd love to talk to them to see why, you know? So I think that that's another way to think of it. Don't think of them as just skimming by and saying, not a coder. You are of interest when you have a varied background. So absolutely, so much experience, almost all experience can translate into that coding. And the ambition and the drive to go into this new field is something that is very impressive. Again, you can feel kind of beaten down after you've worked so hard, and you don't realize that people see that drive, and that can garner you a lot of interest if it's written correctly on your resume. So
Susan from LinkedIn said, I assume you're going to provide her contact information. Yes. Yeah.
Yes,
well,
hello.
you've got it at the end. Don't worry about that. But you can go to projectresume.net. That's her website. And so make a note of that. And we've got that in our resources page at the very last slide for you.
Yes, thank you.
When you were telling that, Annie, that made me think of another thing that I came across when I was teaching at one of the colleges. There was a young lady that she did not fit the mold of a lot of the people that we had that we were educating, and she had, right out of high school, she had gotten married. Her husband had a fabulous job. She didn't need to work. And so they decided to start their family. They had a couple children, and when the children got to be she stayed home with them. And then when they got into kindergarten, she said, hey, I'm ready to go into the workforce. I'm ready to start a new career. So she had chosen, she decided that she did a lot of research and she wanted coding. But she said, I've got this, 6-year gap where I was a stay-at-home mom. And she said, she said, now I've gone through all this education and everything. And one of the directors there made a comment that resonated with me. She said, how do I explain that gap that still makes me look good? And he said, there's nothing wrong with telling them that, you were not privileged. I can't remember what he exactly said, but you were able to take advantage of staying home with your children while they were young, and you wanted to do that, and that you had time to really focus and research what you wanted to do when they went to school. And that you felt so honored to be able to do that. And now that they're in school, I have time, I got my education and picked a career I knew I'd enjoy. And then he said, and then reiterate that you have backup for babies.
Exactly.
Whenever you talk about kids and everything. There's
always
nothing
note that you have
wrong with
childcare.
There's nothing wrong with explaining that gap and say, I really, I'm thankful that I had that time and that it allowed me to sit back. And so I thought that's a great way to explain a gap. Do you have any other situations to explain a gap in employment? Because I know that's something that some people talk about. Maybe this guy went to school or something. Anything else?
Well, I don't think that there's any wrong answer to that question. And people take breaks for any number of reasons. Sometimes they're not voluntary, and that's okay too. And I always encourage people to, on their resume, list your experience. I am, do as I say, not as I do, because I struggle with it too. And, there's things on my resume that maybe I wish didn't look the way that they did. However, always remind yourself that it weighs more heavily on you than on any hiring manager or any other person. And I always kind of say, someone's not going to look at a resume and say, oh, they took 5 years off, they must have been in prison. I think that's exactly what comes into their mind. Like, well, they're going to assume that I was fired in a very dramatic way and that I couldn't work. No, they're going to assume that you had a sick relative or you had children that you had to stop working, or you were fortunate
Or
enough
they
to
may
stop
not even
working.
ask, right? They may
Exactly.
not
They
even
might not
ask.
care. They
Yeah.
might not care.
Tiffany,
In,
Tiffany
yeah,
Carlisle just real quick said that she goes,
oh,
hey, I
sure.
used them to update my resume. It really helped. Tiffany,
Oh,
I
good.
think
Yay.
it's Carlisle. And
Yay,
let's see.
hi.
Oh, let me check on Facebook here. It says
Okay.
Martin says, do you need to get certified before you can actually work in coding? I'm at the finish line of an associate's degree in medical coding and billing. Thanks. Now that, because you also mentioned, and this happened to me, I worked as in coding without being certified for a while,
Mhm.
and you mentioned that too. That in the past that happened more often, not
Right.
so much now, but how
Okay.
would you address that, or what would you tell Martin?
Um, I would say technically no, right? You don't have to have a certification to get a coding position. However, if you're just breaking in, a lot of companies nowadays truly do, it's actually written into their HR policies that you have to have a CPC or you have to have a certification. That being said, that's usually in my experience, to placate a client, just to tell them, oh, we have all certified coders working on your work. So,
Right.
but however, there's a ton of other, there's compliance, there's billing, there's patient representative that will give you access and give you experience with those codes. So even if you're not working as a medical coder, many people, I would say 95% of companies, employers, managers will say, I know that you have the skills. Why don't you take a look, see what you come up with? You can get that experience without having that title. So
Yeah.
as much as you don't want to worry about your gaps, don't worry about your titles. It's all
Yeah.
about the responsibilities that you've
And
had.
getting your foot in the door
Yeah,
sometimes is the
yeah,
first step, because even while you're
absolutely.
going to school, like you said, you're getting that associate's degree, and getting your foot in the door early. Even
Hmm.
if you're
Yeah,
doing, you could be doing front desk. We had
right.
one girl I've talked about in the past that went on lots of interviews and stuff. She ended up getting a job in supply at the
Oh,
hospital, and she
wow.
was just devastated. She was really upset about it.
Mhm.
Uh, However, she only worked at that for 2 months because it allowed her to see every department,
Yes,
everybody, because she was delivering all this stuff.
right.
And so she
Exactly.
made connections that
Yes,
were, and she was so devastated. She goes, I can't believe I got a job in supply, but I got to get a job. Well, it worked out beautifully, and then they
exactly.
snapped her up and everything. There's another question that came in from Facebook, and it says, I might have to. These are getting kind of small.
Okay.
Uh, Ermi, I'm not going to pronounce her last name. Sometimes you just need to reword the duties and responsibilities that was asked in the position applied. That's true, right?
Absolutely.
So when
Yes.
somebody comes in and they say, hey, I live in, the Houston area, which is
Mhm.
like one of the number 3 highest paid for coders, if you didn't know that. And so they said, these are the 4 places I'd really like to work.
Mhm.
Can they come to you and say, here's my resume information. These are the 4 things I'd really like to get my foot in the door. What do I need to do? By letting you know the jobs that they're looking at, that helps too, right? To gear
Absolutely.
that
Yes, it
resume.
does. It truly does. And it helps to create that resume and take a look, make sure that we're both on the same page. We're creating a resume that is what you need, not only for that one position, but moving forward as well. And yes, rewording your bullet points is truly one of the biggest challenges, but it really is one of the most important steps. I will say a quick tip, a recruiter or a hiring manager usually only has 5 to 7 seconds when they first look at your resume. So that is not a lot of time at all. So what you really want to grab their attention with those bullet points. And I've seen a lot of people make the mistake of using an adjective to start that, effectively coded or completely filed or what have you.
Yeah.
Start that bullet point with that coded or the filed or the maintained or the organized, because that's what is going to grab their eye. That is an action verb. I was just telling them I have an 11-year-old who's learning all about verbs and nouns. So that is an action verb that you want to use, and that's going to catch their eye. And even if they don't read the whole bullet point, they can get a good sense, or at least a preliminary sense of, oh, wait, I want to look at this person, and set your resume aside.
That's
so,
really
yes,
good. That leads us to another question that you had mentioned. What information should I include on my resume? Because I can say with my own experience and seeing other people's resumes that they want to put everything in there,
Yes.
right? And sometimes less is more.
Right, absolutely.
Got a recruiter
I feel that it's often feast or famine. Either it's everything they've ever done, or they will send me, a job title and that's it. And I'm like, wait, what did you do there? So you definitely want to include all your certifications. And this goes back to actually what I was saying before about some of the hiring managers, some of the HR folks, they don't know what a CPC is completely. They don't know.
Right. HR doesn't know anything. In fact, I made a comment, and you'll laugh too. I think you'll know. When the hospital gets approval to hire somebody, right? And they're like, okay, we can hire 2 coders. All right. They call HR, they put the ad out, right?
Right.
HR does that, but they use the same template ad they've always used for the last 10 years, right?
Yes.
They don't ask, and so and the HR people have no idea what the credentials mean. It's like, hey, this guy's got 5 credentials. Yeah, well, that one's in basket weaving. It won't work.
Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh, that's the one I used too. Basket weaving. How funny. We used to say underwater basket weaving when we were in college. That was what we were going to switch our major to. But yes, it's true. They don't know, and that goes also to the required experience. Sometimes it's an old. Just a list, and they say, should we just put this one out? And they say yes. So you should always include all your certifications right at the top, put them after your name, you earned them, show them off. I encourage people to put any education that they have past high school. I don't think that you need to spend space on your resume with that high school education. It's usually a prerequisite for a job. So if you don't have it, they're going to find out later. Your skills and talents, and then your job experience. If you were an intern, a coding intern, I absolutely include that. Any type of internship that you received, whether it was part of your schooling or outside of your schooling, I would include that as well. However, any volunteer experience, if you were a stay-at-home mom, if you did have a gap that you have, do not fill that information in on your resume. That is for them to learn about when they're talking to you. It's going to be better to explain that verbally, and you can.
So if you were the president of the PTA committee at school, you don't need to list that.
No, you don't. You don't.
It's not applicable to the coding in this.
Exactly. And I'm sure, and that's not to diminish any volunteer work, because I know people do get really great experience as volunteers and in PTA and things like that. But that is not going to set you apart from other coding. It's impressive, but that's not going to give you a little strike in the pro column. So
yeah. And again, really, people usually overdo resumes, right? Versus under.
Absolutely. Yes.
Let's see. Let me just double check here. Make sure I didn't miss any. Okay, so here's one. It says, Ermi also said, sometimes you just reword the duties and responsibilities. And yes, okay. And then Susan said, she's had trouble. I even have 2 years experience in the sniff coding and can't get an interview. So again, it's the wording. Let's see what else she said. Okay. And then that goes with this. I think this is a great caveat to that. How long should my resume be? Because You did mention people only have a few minutes. You don't want your
Right.
resume to end up in file 13. And quite honestly, resumes change through the years what they want. Like
Yeah.
there was in the 80s, it was a big thing. Into the 90s, it was getting to be where they wanted a picture with your resume, right?
Yeah.
And everybody was putting pictures on the resumes. And
Yeah.
then they were saying, well, use colored paper or, fancy cardstock. Well, now if you think about it, they don't like print out resumes, right? Nobody
No.
touches it. So
No.
it goes, it's all electronic, and they're going to
Right.
send it from one department to another department and stuff like that. So they don't care if you've got perfume on it or your resume's pink or it's heavy cardstock,
That's right.
stuff,
That's
because
right.
that was an 80s thing and a 90s
That
thing.
was.
So
Yes,
how
absolutely.
long? I had always been told you never want your resume to be more than one page, but what would you say about the length of a resume?
I agree with that statement. I am one page, and I have been working since the year 2000. So I mean, in healthcare, I've been working since the year 2000, and so that's a lot of years. And I have not been in. I've been in a lot of jobs. I really have moved around quite a bit, so I have a lot to put on my resume. You can have a 2-page resume, of course. I'm not saying that that's going to diminish anything, but if you think about it, if someone does print out your resume in an interview situation, if it's on their desk and they grab it on their way out the door, let's say they just grab that first page, well then you're still where you started. Let's say they grab that second page and they don't see the first page, then you're really in a bad place because all your good stuff's on that first page. So I encourage folks to keep their submitted resume to one page. Have your most recent experience at the top of your experience list. Write all that out, and you can discuss, just like any gap years or if they ask or anything like that, you can discuss that in an interview situation or on the phone with HR in a phone interview. Those are things that you can talk about. And that is the best way to do it, because you don't want to get lost in the shuffle, and you don't want someone to, first of all, roll their eyes and say, okay, I get it, and they're just scrolling. That's number one. Or you don't want number two for them to see a 3-page resume and then say, well, they're overqualified. This is entry level.
Yeah.
That's not what you're trying to put across, but when they've got 5 to 7 seconds, they're going to take everything that they can to get through those and weed out what they don't want to look at again. So really try to keep it at one page. Really try.
Well, Sharon Harris on YouTube asked, she goes, she says, what if you don't have a credential yet? So I think she's referring to, you said put your credential at the top with your name and everything.
Yes.
Is there something that they can put on there, like working towards CPC or plan to test in October of,
Absolutely. Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. I don't, obviously don't put something after your name if you haven't yet earned it. That's fine. But in your certification section, put AHEMA, put AAPC, and then underneath it, exactly, working towards sitting for the exam to become a CPC, or scheduled to
like
sit
that.
for the RHIC.
Yeah, scheduled to sit, because then they know you've got the date.
It's coming up. Right.
And the people that are hiring, and looking at the resume, they know how it works. They know how AHEMA works. They know how AAPC and the other credentialing organizations, which ones are proctored and which ones aren't, and so they have a good.
Well, and what that also does is that puts those letters on your resume. So if someone's using a search tool, they will see that CPC, pass that along to the hiring manager. That hiring manager may be able to say, yes, that's fine, I'll speak with her, or him. And
And you mentioned also before that, just because I'm going to paraphrase or word it a little bit different. Just because they say they want something doesn't mean they're going to get it, right?
That's right.
So
exactly.
They may say they want, a CPC with, 5 years of experience or 2 years of experience, but if if you resonate with them, or
Right.
for some reason, something, your background or whatever, and they know you're working towards it, sometimes personality gets you a job
Absolutely.
versus, and so
Absolutely.
that resume gets you in the door. I used to say that, by the time you get to the interview process, if you're a Debbie Downer in the interview process, or they know you can't get along with Ethel that's been there for
Right.
30 years, that is, a production guru, they're not getting rid of
Right.
Ethel, but they want somebody that can work with Ethel, right?
Absolutely.
And they
Exactly.
don't want
Exactly.
conflict in an office sometimes weighs more than experience. So
It's true. It's true. And I think that sometimes upper management, they are a little bit removed from the day-to-day code team or what have you, compliance department. And I see it a lot with risk adjustment.
yeah.
I'm a CRC, I see that you are too, but
Oh, my favorite
they,
credential.
I know. They'll say, I've actually seen this. They'll say, we want 3 years of HCC coding experience, but you can't have worked for any other HCC company or HCC contract. It's like, well, which one do you want? Do you want, it's, that's upper management saying, well, we want the cream of the crop, but we also don't want any competitors coming in, so they're great, and they know what they need and they know what they want, but like you said, sometimes they don't always get what they want. They're going to start with their perfect candidate, and then they're going to
Right.
speak to who applies, and then they're going to choose their candidate. So I always encourage people, if you feel that you can do the job that you read and you want to do it, and you're not 100% exactly matching up with their qualifications, go ahead and apply. You can't lose. You
All
cannot
they're going
lose.
to do is say no,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And if
Exactly.
you can land an interview,
Yes.
that gives you experience in the interview process. Even
Yes.
it, don't always stay positive. Always give
Right.
always stay positive. Uh, go in thinking that, hey, I still could land this job, but if I don't, at least I've been able to get through. I know what they're going to ask. Other people are going to ask now,
That's right.
or,
That's right.
they got a chance
No,
to see my
absolutely.
personality. Another
Absolutely.
question said, I need to gain experience. What can I do to get that? Sharon said that. And, Annie mentioned before, like internships and things. CCO has a great internship program, and you can look at
Oh,
that. Just go to cco.us because it works really well it's remote. And I would
oh,
also go to your local chapter meetings, your AHEMA, your AAPC meetings and stuff like that, and ask about, and you probably are already doing this, internships that are out there in your area,
right.
because again, sometimes just getting experience doesn't mean that it doesn't always necessarily think outside the box. It doesn't always necessarily
Right.
have to be a coding experience job. You could look into
Right.
billing and stuff. It's a lot easier to get
Yeah.
into billing. Billing actually is supposed to pay more, although I don't know. um,
Some of them do,
let's see.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was really shocked when I saw that come through. There's like, wow, billers, but billing isn't my passion, so I don't pay
Right.
attention to that thing.
Right.
Let's see. I think we got another question over here. How many years of work experience do you recommend putting in the resume? I have a gap of 30 years from my initial medical records experience in my current position and HIT education. Mm,
Well, I would say, if they and a lot of online applications do ask for that. They have a system. You have to enter things in. Sometimes you have to upload your resume and then you have to re-enter it again. We've all had
yeah.
that pain. But I would be honest, and if you do have experience that is 30 years ago, that's still experience. If you work there for 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, what have you, put that in there. They're asking for it, you're giving it to them, and again, it all applies. Things change, of course. Obviously, healthcare is evolving and changing constantly. However, that does still give you experience that the next person does not have.
Right.
So, and that might get you into a phone interview or an interview situation where you can
Right.
explain, "Oh, this is what I did."
You know, something that I think a lot of people don't realize when they're just looking at this career path, the
Mhm.
median age for coders is really quite, I don't even think it starts at 40. I think it's probably 45 to
Mhm.
55 and up.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not it is not a career that a lot of young people think about, which is a shame
I
because
know.
you advance very quickly in this career
Yes.
path. After 2 years, I mean,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
really out there. And in 5, so if you were to go into this career path right out of high school, then my gosh, you'd be running departments by the time you were,
Absolutely.
30,
Absolutely.
whether
Because
you had a degree or not.
there's coders that are needed, but there's also leaders. They need leaders,
Yeah.
and they need young people who want to lead. Sometimes when people, if this is their second career, they don't want to be a leader. They are interested in the production side of it. They want to work as a coder, and that's fine too. But yes, like you said, I mean, I think it is unfortunate that more younger people aren't reaching out, because there really is a lot of and you can work for 10 years in one spot and then go to compliance, or then go to billing, or then go to management, or what have you. So
And then end
but
up being a consultant. And if you're young
right.
enough and don't have, lots of children and the family constraints, you can be traveling and doing consult work. I know several of the
Absolutely.
people know that Chandra that worked with us before, I mean, she gets to travel and see all over the United States, and she loves what she does. And of course, she's got multiple credentials for the positions she has,
Right.
but she started young. She's one of the youngest
Right.
people that I know that has reached that, the not pinnacle, but that status. And
Sure.
so it's fun to see
Yeah.
her really
Yeah.
going at it, and I mean,
Absolutely. Accomplishing
uh,
so much.
this was another question, and I thought about this too. Do you need a cover letter? Is that still a thing to use cover letters? Because I know
I know it
that when you
seems.
apply online, sometimes it says, submit resume, submit cover letter.
Yes, absolutely. And they did 100% come in much more handy when you had to mail or fax down at
Yeah.
the old Kinko's. I spent a
Yeah.
lot of time with that. But they are still important. And I'm going to tell you why. One, yes, sometimes they are required on those electronic
Mhm.
applications, and they specifically ask for a cover letter. The other times on those electronic applications, they'll have a free text space that says, to please tell us a little bit about yourself. And that is when your cover letter content can come in very handy. Just cut and paste it in there. Also, if someone says, or a job application says, submit your resume to Annie.Barnaby, then you don't want to just send an attachment, right, on a blank resume. So that cover letter content really does come in handy. It's not absolutely necessary like it used to be.
Right.
But again, sending an email with just the resume is kind of just like sending a piece of mail, and someone opens it up and it's like, well, what am I supposed to do with this thing? They
Yeah.
know what they're supposed to do, but you really should kind of ease them
Yeah.
into it a little bit. So I do like to have a cover letter on hand. I used to rewrite them for every position that I was applying to, and then my hard drive had 63 cover letters. And my little Virgo brain cannot handle that disorganization, so I deleted them all, and I just wrote one that was just about me and how I can be an asset to it, just as your team or your department. And again, it can be hard. It can be hard to write that cover letter. Another tip I want to share about the cover letter: if you have a problem writing about yourself, a lot of times people get the "I think" or "in my opinion, I would be a good
Oh,
candidate for this
yeah.
job." Take that out. You don't think that, you know that. So take the "I think" out. And I had to write mine several times as I would speak it, and then I went through and I removed the doubtful phrases from the text. So don't worry if it shouldn't come naturally. We don't sit and brag about ourselves, but
No.
it's a great thing to have. And it's not bragging, it's literally introducing yourself. So
That's really, really a good point. Uh, when it's very difficult when you're writing something, to detach yourself and look at it from another person's perspective, looking, and that negative verbiage really sends a message in the brain.
Yeah.
So even when you're doing an interview, and we could talk for another hour about the interview process. So make sure that you always say things in a positive format. Even if you I joke all the time, billing is not what I prefer. Now I did it and I can do it and I don't mind it, but it's not my passion like ICD-10 and risk adjustment and stuff like that. So if somebody's asking me about billing, I would never say I don't like billing, but you can twist that and say it in a positive way. Yes, I have experience with the billing and learned a lot during the time that I was doing billing. My passion is, da, 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 da. And there's like, okay, well, they got experience in billing. And so I think that's important. Nina has a good statement here. Nina B says, I interviewed just yesterday. I didn't get the job. She said, I didn't know incident 2 question. I bet I won't ever get that wrong again. Don't give up, coders. That is so wonderful.
That's right. Yay. I love you. Nina was her name?
Nina B on YouTube. Yeah.
That's right. Hang in there. It's true. It's true. And, I always say too, you are interviewing the company as much as they are interviewing you. So if someone doesn't want to give you a chance because you don't know one small niche off the cuff in an interview stress situation, you might have dodged a bullet there. So, think of it that way as well. Don't give up. If you don't know something in an interview, good for you for being honest. Never ever lie in an interview. Never ever lie in your resume. Trust me, I've seen people do it and it gets them into way more trouble than they ever would want to think about. So it's not worth it. It's silly. So yes, absolutely be honest and say, we just touched on that in my coding education, but I'm willing to learn more. It did interest me. There are ways to move forward, and
that's a good way to say that. Don't ever say, well, they didn't teach us that in school.
Right. No.
The verbiage there is better. It's like, we touched on it, and yeah.
And a lot of people that I've interviewed myself, the companies that I was with wanted them to know Excel. It wasn't a hard qualification, but we would say, do you have experience with Excel? I forget how this one woman answered, but it was obvious that she had never seen an Excel spreadsheet, which would have been fine, but a good way, again, to answer is to say, I don't, but I'm a fast learner. I am good with computers, and just let them know you can be taught. That's all they want to know. That's all they want to know. Every job is
other platforms that are, that you use. And honestly, when we were talking about other skills earlier, that really resonate with people and give you point system, especially in risk adjustment, you need to be good with Excel and or at least have that basic overview knowledge, especially with remote stuff, because sometimes they're having you put information and content into a spreadsheet. So having experience with Excel, and you can go get experience on YouTube and all kinds of free stuff, then you can say, yes, I have experience with Excel and I'm excited to up that skill level.
Exactly.
If you guys use Excel a lot, I would love to really dig in there and get better at it. It's like,
and learn exactly. Learn from your senior people and things like that. And if you show your excitement to learn that and to have that opportunity, they'll see it.
Yeah.
They'll see that.
Let's see, we're getting close. This is the last question that we had, but we're getting close to wrapping up for our hour. But I can see some other questions. Let's see. Do you recommend revising your resume for every job you apply to? We kind of covered that a little bit, but what do you think if for every job you apply? And before you say that, I know that if, say you live in an area that has 2 hospitals, okay?
Sure.
And you're going to apply for both hospitals. Before you get to the interview process, you need to go and research the 2 hospitals and let them know. Because like throwing in the saying that, I realized Shannon just got a new cardiologist. I think that's fabulous because I really enjoyed the cardiology training that I got. And they're like, oh, they know about, stuff.
Yeah.
But that
it perks up. And like you said, we could definitely talk for another hour about interview, but that is an excellent point. Please always research where you're going before you get into that interview so that you can intelligently talk about why you want that job, not just a job, because that's what they want to see. In terms of tailoring your resume, if at all possible, I would advise against it. Your resume is a snapshot of you and everything that you have to offer. So truly, if everything that you have to offer is on there and is clear and concise, you shouldn't have to change it for a position. And if you try to, you run the risk of changing it to something that they would have liked to see the first thing anyway. It's kind of, it's silly, but it's a cliche, but it is almost like dating. It's like, this is who I am. This is what I'm capable of. This is what I can do for you. And it's true. It's true. And there have been times where I have applied for a job. I've gone in, the person at the interview has said, you are not right for this job. And I'm like, okay, great. Then why am I here? But they've said, you are right for another department. So if you try and pigeonhole yourself into what you think they want, you're going to miss out on some opportunities. And that's the company you want to work for, the company that's looking out for other departments, looking for talent where they can get it. So
really good organization and companies make sure that they've got the right person in the right seat.
Absolutely, because they do not want to go through that again. You not want to go through.
It's a tedious process. So you may go in for an interview, and again, you may not know the incident too, but the way that you handled that and with grace and whatever, they they may say, hey, this Nina applied for this job, but she wasn't a good fit. However, they may reach out to you because they can't find somebody to do, they need somebody with that bubbly personality to do the front desk, or they heard Dr. So-and-so needed, their person's going on OB, would you be interested in a temp thing? You just never know. That's all that networking. Now, and one more thing before we get to, and if you got any other questions, guys, let us know because we're getting ready to wrap up. Both her and I are very excited about this stuff, and we could talk for a long time.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
If you go for that interview, one piece of advice I would give you too is that as soon as you walk in that door, you need to be on point, because the person that greets you probably has more weight and say and whether you get hired or not. You would be surprised. The receptionist, they are looking, and they will come back and ask them. They say, well, what did you think about so and so? So go in with confidence. You try to be relaxed. It's okay to say I'm nervous because I'm really excited and I want to work for this company. And that receptionist or whatever is going to say, yeah, it is a really great place to work. And so they will come back, or they'll say, you know what, they were kind of a sourpuss, or whatever, or they got on their phone and they were like talking to their girlfriend about, and she was saying really negative things about somebody she saw at the grocery store. He's like, we don't want somebody. So, just be on point. And I would even discourage you from having your phone while you're waiting for an interview. Yeah. Don't be sitting there going through that. Instead, put it up, pick out a magazine and flip through it.
100%. 100%. I say the same thing. Leave it in your car. If you're going to be tempted, leave it in your car. Don't be on the phone in the elevator or walking through the halls, because someone has an interview coming up. They're going to go use the restroom, and then they're going to see you in the hall, and that's their first impression, not you coming in. And if you're sitting in a chair and you're on your phone, that may seem, innocuous, but you have to put that phone away before you shake someone's hand. And you don't want to do that. You just want to be able to go right in, give the eye contact, and like you said, it is perfectly fine to say I'm nervous, or if they ask you a question. Now I know we've segued into interviewing, but if they ask you a question in an interview, it's okay to say, can we come back to that, or can I think on that for a little bit? They are fine with that. That's not going to count against you. So anyway, like I said,
they know they know you're nervous. So let's wrap up. Again, if you have questions, let me know. I can see them, but let's talk a little bit more about the services that you can provide at your organization, and what's the best way to get a hold of them. Now, again, guys, just real quick, the link to Project Resume is right there. So if you're in our club, you get the slide deck. Now, if you're seeing us on LinkedIn or even YouTube or Facebook, if you're not part of the CCO club, feel free to go to cco.us/club. And these webinars and stuff are always saved in there. We put CEUs together and combine things for you to be able to get CEUs that are applicable to what you really need. Plus, we have fun doing this. I think you can tell that the CCO Live is a lot more casual, not as formal as our other webinars that we do. But our goal is to get the content that you need. And we also I'd like to ask you a question before we wrap up with how to get a hold of Annie, is that if you're interested in a maybe a credential or a way to show them that you are a well-versed in the business of medicine, let us know, because we've been kind of tossing around an idea of showing that you may not know in-depth compliance or billing or the coding and everything, but that you have a broad spectrum awareness of the verbiage, like incident to and so on and so forth, so that you it would be like a launching point. And so again, we're tossing some ideas. If that's something that you think of might be beneficial to you, let us know. And so Annie, what services do you provide, and how would they get a hold of you?
Well, as you said, we are at projectresume.net. We do have a phone number there, but it's best to use our email link. There's a contact us at the bottom of every page. And we have resume services. We have resumes and cover letters. We do have a CEU out there that it's actually 2 CEUs that's all about professional development. It's recorded, so that's on your own time.
I saw that. I was like, oh, I like that one.
Yeah, it's pretty fun, if I do say so. I like it. And we have we just finished our interview companion, which is it's a tangible laminated item, piece of paper, really, but it's a guide that will tell you how to answer certain interview questions. You can stick it in your portfolio to help you. It's like your friend in an interview. And we also just started our career development program, which is you have a live webinar similar to this, but that you're on. We'll answer any questions that you have. You would get the resume service with that. You get the interview companion. You get a mock interview with feedback. And then you get a portfolio to keep your resume in there. So it's kind of like the complete package. And we're really proud of that. And that is live now too. So do contact us and look around our website. There's a lot of content and a lot of questions and answers. So.
And the website's very user-friendly. I would have actually popped it up on the screen, but as some of you guys know, my internet is not always the best. So, but we've put the information for you to get out there. Real quick, Fallon says, my job looks at my nursing license more than my CPC. Can I get any assistance when I got to interviews. You know what? She can help you with that, because I know I've seen some FAQs on the website about that, and actually nurses make really good coders. Sharon says,
Yes.
thanks for the time, ladies. I always welcome everything you share. We appreciate that, guys. You know,
Yes.
this is fun, and
It's
let us
fun.
know if there's other types of interviews you would like to see. We've networked for a lot of years, and not everybody's really savvy and want to get on camera, but you know what, we have fun, and on the CCO Live it's casual, right?
Yes,
So
fun.
yeah, so go out and check her website. You can ask her questions, and changing of careers, I've had through CCO, I've taught several people that were truck drivers. I can't think of another career that was even farther away than that, and they did really, really well. So it doesn't matter if you're a male, female, how old you are. We've done webinars on that as well. Age isn't a big deal. So make sure that you check out those, and thank you guys for staying with us tonight. So we'll close off with everybody on YouTube and Facebook, and also on LinkedIn. It's a lot of fun to have them on there now as well. I'll just leave that up there. I know Boyd splashed out the more than once, Annie's Project Resume.net website.
Yep. Perfect. Thanks, guys. We will see you next Wednesday, I mean, on the next CCO Live, and we'll be letting you know what that topic is next week. All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.